please approach and have a seat with me. We have we have Petros Mastakas. He is a UNHCR Durable Solutions Officer, and we have el-Wathig, el-Gozoli. He is a member of the Sudanese Swiss charity. We will hear more about it soon. And let's have a seat first, maybe. Get a bit more comfy. And me, myself, I am Miriam Knecht. I work with Switzerland for UNHCR. You heard it. You probably already saw it when you booked the tickets. We are Zurich Film Festival's charity partner. And we are the Swiss national partner of UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, the UNO-Flüchtlingsorganisation, which means we raise awareness for the refugee cause in Switzerland and Liechtenstein, and we also raise funds to finance UNHCR's missions in the whole world for refugees and displaced people, like the ones in Sudan. You saw it. 12 million had to flee already when war broke out last year. In total, there are 120 million worldwide we were forced to flee their homes. And I can tell you this number is rising, unfortunately. Hind, my first question to you. I mean, we saw in the movie at first these people, they were so hopeful, they were so positive, and in the end, they all had to flee too.
Yeah, I really don't like to talk about it like that, because for me, what the Sudanese people did during the revolution is still alive. I was traveling with the film and I met Sudanese people, for example, in Canada. And it's very important that in this film you see the people aware about what they want and strong and inspiring. And this is the image that I want to keep. And even if the situation is terrible today, this energy and what the Sudanese people did, it's the third revolution. It's not the first one. They did a revolution in the 60s, in 85. They had time of democracy. It's a country that is fighting for freedom since more than 100 years, because they also had the British colonization and they fought against it. And it's a country that has 10,000 years of history. In the film, the woman, you see the women, how strong they are, and they all relate themselves to the story of el-Kandakat in Sudan, which was the women who were queens at the time of Pharaoh times. There is pyramids in Sudan. Most of the people think it's only in Egypt, but there was a civilization that was very advanced also in Sudan at the same time. So it's a long history, and we have to see it in this perspective. For me, it's not a failure, and it's not finished, and we don't know what's gonna happen. The war cannot last forever. The war is gonna have an end at a certain point, and Sudanese people all around the world are ready to come back and to construct a new country. This is the way I want to see it personally.
Mm-hmm. So you're absolutely. So you're still in contact with the protagonists?
Oh yes, I have a very good news to give you, is that we are the opening film in the Doha Film Festival, Agial, and they are inviting the five protagonists that you see in the film. So Shajan, Khattab, Maha and Muzammil are going to come and see the film. And also Shajan came to Venice. It was a kind of miracle, because now she is in Emirates, and the consul of Italy refused the visa. He said that it was fake documents that we were giving him. So the president of Venice Film Festival called him. And then the consul of Italy made the visa, and at last minute, so she had the visa on Wednesday, and on Thursday she was traveling from Dubai to Venice, and it was her first time in Europe. And so she was spending 1 week in Venice and doing a lot of interviews with international press, also interviews with Arab news. So it was for me a big achievement to have her, and she's gonna come now to Doha and also be on stage and say some poems. So you see, it continues, and Shajan is writing a book. So yes, I wanted to give you this good news.
These are great news. El-Wathig, you are Sudanese yourself. Now you've seen this movie. What are your feelings?
Very sad, really. But at the same time, I'm really very impressed. I'm very impressed of those young people, the energy you see, the enthusiasm, and also the soft power, I would say, which these people really they have. For them, dictatorship is not an option. They are ready to fight, and they are not fighting for themselves. They are fighting for their generation. But as you have seen also this young lady, she was saying, it's not about me, it is about those homeless kids. This is really something really which gave us the hope, because I'm 100% sure these people one day they will reach what they would like, which is the slogan which you have seen maybe in the film, حرية سلام وعدالة. حرية which means freedom, salam which means peace, and adala which means justice. And for sure they will achieve it one day. The war will get end sooner or later, and a dictatorship like what you have seen in the past for sure is not an option anymore.
You have family in Sudan still and friends. Are you in contact with them? What do they tell you about the situation right now?
Yeah, I have my father, I have my two sisters. They could move to Cairo, like so many Sudanese. But we still have contact also with our neighbors and also with some relatives. The situation is really very bad. Maybe if I compare the situation in Ukraine with the situation in Sudan, in Ukraine at least you know who is your enemy. You know that you have also some people who can protect you, who can fight for you, which are your soldiers, which are your police, and you have the infrastructure. In Sudan, you don't know who is your enemy because you don't know who is fighting against whom. There is no security. There's no security at all. You can everything really which you can imagine really which is bad is now happening in Sudan. We can talk about rape. We can talk about any kind of violence. We can talk about criminals. No safety at all. Really, the situation is very bad. I don't want to say everywhere in Sudan. Maybe in Port Sudan the situation is different because it's not the warring parties are not reaching there, or the fight is not reaching Port Sudan, for example, or not the very north, but in Khartoum, and especially the situation is bad in Darfur.
Yeah, can I say something about Darfur? I discovered something when I was in Sudan that I'm not talking about in the film. It's Darfur already 20 years ago. It's about the land, because the land is, Sudan is, people, they always say Sudan is poor. Sudan is very rich, and that's why there is the war. Because all these people, they're fighting to get the resources of the country, the gold, the uranium. People talk about it in the film, but also the land, because there is very good agriculture, and some of the villages that was burned, then the land was sold, and there is a lot of Saudi farms, for example, Emirati farms, and then everything is just doesn't stay in the country. They produce, and everything is sent abroad for countries who are like big deserts, so they need it. So it's a kind of new colonization. And also the fact that Sudan was cut in two in 2011 between the south and the north, it was because of the oil, because there was oil in the south. So it was about controlling oil for United States, Chinese people. And so when they cut the country in two, they were saying it was for humanitarian reasons, but that it was also for these reasons. So every time there is a war behind it, there is like big interest from other countries. Egypt doesn't have any. They don't want the revolution to happen in Sudan because it's treating them. There is a dictatorship right now in Egypt, and they would not like to have a revolution succeeding in Sudan. And I remember on the walls was written things like Ya Sisi, Ya Wasran, Ebad min Sudan, which means Oh Sisi, put your hands out of our country, your dirty hands. So the people in Sudan, they know it, and when in the press and the news you read it's a civil war, it's also not true. Because it's not the Sudanese people who are fighting, it's two army factions, the regular army and a militia. And then behind everyone there is countries, there is Wagner, there is Russia on one side. So it's not the people of Sudan who wants this war. Most of the people, as you said, they want peace. They had war before, and they are aware of this racism that was created in the time of Omar al-Bashir to put people against each other. And now it's really a new page. So it's very important to have all these things in mind. To picture Sudan. And what I want to say as Tunisian, Moroccan, from my family is that for us, when I saw what was happening in Sudan and what the Sudanese people do, it's a source of inspiration. It's really, that's why I want to say the poetry never dies, the words they say, everything they do, it's there. There is books, there is literature, Sudanese literature. And when you think about the French Revolution, for example, just after the French Revolution, we had in France a dictatorship with Napoleon, and then we had 20 years of war, and then the kingdom came back, and then so it was like almost 150 years of fight until French people get their democracy. So it's always like that. It's a long process. And it's also to say that any human being wants freedom, and this is what the Sudanese prove. Like freedom is not something for Europe or a privilege. It's any human being on this planet wants freedom, and the passion for freedom. This is what the Sudanese people have in their heart, and they will never lose it.
Mm-hmm. They have it in their heart, but life is tough, and as we've seen, a lot have been displaced. Petros, last year when the war broke out, you went to Chad to help Sudanese refugees. Can you tell us a bit more about that, about the situation?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Congratulations. Thank you also for the invitation to be here with you. Indeed, I am part of the United Nations Refugee Agency. We have this very difficult, incomprehensible almost name, High Commissioner for Refugees. It comes from the 50s. There's a reason why it's so complicated. So it's the UN Refugee Agency. I was part of a team of experts that were mobilized to respond to the refugee emergency. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people had to move, mainly from the two Darfurs, from the Darfur provinces and the Kordofan provinces, not so much from Khartoum directly. I don't know which is the equivalent of a small border city in Switzerland of 50,000, but in Chad, which is on the western border of Sudan, there is Adre. Adre is a town of 40,000, right on the borderline, right at the borderline between the two countries. Over a period of 3 weeks, this little town of 40,000, right at the borderline, saw more than 450,000 people gathering in the city, in the town, camping everywhere. Imagine the equivalent of any city in any country of 40,000 waking up, metaphorically speaking, and then finding tens of thousands of people camping in their streets, in their schools, in their squares, in their mosques, in every public space. That was the emergency situation. So I was one of the few colleagues that were mobilized. I was there from August to December 2023, and my job was to coordinate the support to the local authorities and the local population, because actually they were there before us. Mm-hmm. They opened their houses, they shared their food and water and medicine. until the international community was able to have presence. So yes, I was there. Actually, it was the second time. I was also in the first Darfur War from 2004 to 2006, in a little bit to the north, in a province called, in a provincial capital called Iriba, but it was exactly the same. And there, the war, then and now, was primarily for the land. Complicated nowadays with all the elements that you added. The point is that no matter what the reason is, politics, the land, colonization, decolonization, freedom, people are suffering. There are almost 11 million, I saw it somewhere in the film, there are more than 11 million people are affected by the conflict. There's now full-fledged conflict. Probably after the film was shot, the documentary was shot, things went worse, much worse. More than 2 million, close to 3 million are those who crossed borders outside Sudan and became refugees. Another 8 million moved inside their country and they're internally displaced. There are so many untold stories. I was happy that you gave us a bit of follow-up news on the protagonists of the film. There are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of others for whom no one will have a story to tell about what has become of them. Sexual and gender-based violence, tremendously high percentages. Access to the basic amenities of life. Don't take it for granted that people have enough food and water and shelter or a doctor or a school. The average quantity of water available when I was there back in September and October 2023 was 3 liters per person per day. 3 liters per person per day is 2 big bottles that you can buy outside at the bar. Imagine that this is the quantity of water that every person had to drink, wash, clean, and cook. It is a bit better now, but still not resolved. All the response and assistance depends on the response and assistance by the international community. The neighboring countries of Sudan, they all opened their borders, which is not to be taken for granted in our countries, in the European Union, in Europe in general. It's not to be taken for granted. They all opened their borders. In Chad, I know Chad very well because it's the second time I spent time there. I actually did 2 years back in the first Darfur War and only 4 months this time, but it was, I think, enough to show me. They are basically sharing their poverty. They are using their precious resources. There's no water in the desert in Chad. And they are sharing what they don't have with hundreds of thousands of refugees. Imagine in our societies, what would have been the reaction? So, all the basic amenities of life, all the intervention by the humanitarian agencies, the United Nations, other charity organizations, many different kinds of, depend on the response of the international community. What is the response of the international community? It has one very short name: funding. Governments contribute, private persons contribute, the private sector contributes. Without those contributions, it's impossible to help out. And when it is impossible to help out, people will not just wait there. They will have to find solutions for themselves. They depend, the solutions they will find depend on the assistance made available. I think it's a moral duty for all of us to think what we can do. And maybe it's a kind of fatigue that has been developing. Okay, Sudan, they have had wars for the last 50 years. Again? Not again. Well, this is correct. War has been repeating itself for many different reasons in Sudan, in Yemen, in Somalia. I will not enumerate all the countries, but still, people have needs and they need to survive. There's trauma to be healed, and of course, the future to be ensured for the children and the vulnerable. Why am I saying all of this? It's just to make the point that while the situation is bad, it can go worse. In the end, yes, change will come, and there's no way back to the situation that was out there in Sudan in the 90s, in the 80s. But this is not good enough for the people who need to have a doctor, for the raped girl that needs to have access to a specialized professional, for the children who want to go to school, and for the elderly that need a shelter during the rainy season or during the hours when the sun is burning.
And maybe we have to mention at this point that UNHCR is underfunded. There is just not enough money to help all the people we would like to help.
Only a quarter of the total needs of UNHCR and other UN agencies is funded, which means only a quarter of what is needed can be offered. And if you allow me to go to this last point I would like to make, it's not going to be a verbal point, but you will allow me to ask you to participate in a short exercise with me. It will take something like 60 seconds. I spoke about refugees and I analyzed a bit what assistance is and the politics and how the United Nations intervenes and the emergency response and what happened in Adre and in other countries. But in essence, it all comes down to the following. A refugee has to deal with something very close to the exercise we're going to do together in the next 60 seconds. The exercise is like this. I'm going to ask you to have a look around you. I'm going to count up to 3. And when I say 3, I would please ask you to stand up and grab one of the things that you have in front of you, next to you, around you. It could be a thing or a person or both or nothing. Are you ready to join me? Okay. So I will count 1, 2, 3. Please stand up. Can you please show me, if you grabbed something or someone, can you please show me? This is what refugees, thank you for the lights, that's very useful. I see bags, personal items, water, phone, camera, nothing, a friend, a bag, more purses. I see no money, but still. This is what refugees have to do literally in 3 seconds when bombs start falling. Thank you for joining me.
Soon. Yeah, a microphone wouldn't be useful if I would have to flee right now. But el-Wathig, speaking of funds, I mean, you're a member of the Sudanese Swiss charity. This is exactly what you're trying to do, to raise funds for the Sudanese people. Can you please tell us a bit more about it?
Yes, exactly. At the beginning, when we have established this group, it was 1 month or 2 months after the war started. Because I remember we met, we as Sudanese community here in Zurich, and we started to talk about the situation in Sudan, and we all really felt really ashamed that we could do nothing for our families or for our countries. We are living here, most of us, even Swiss, like myself, and we hear only about the war. We are supporting our families, yes, our sisters, our brothers, everything. But what about the others, who has no people really to help them? And that is why we agreed to first to try to unify all the Sudanese in one group, so that also we can try to make the Swiss people here, or at least our friends, our neighbors, aware of the situation in Sudan, and to start also collecting some donations and to think about what project we can do in Sudan. We have done this. We have collected really good sum of money, we can say, by really having kind of events, cultural events or whatever, selling food, for example. And we decided to work with UNHCR because for us it is important to have this transparency. If we collect the money, we would like also to ensure and to make sure that this money really will reach the people who need it. And the easiest and the most effective way is to work with recognized and well-known NGO like UNHCR. And that is why this is the reason why also I know Miriam, because we are collaborating with each other for longer than 1 year. Important to mention that this group, it's not only for the Sudanese. Yes, it's called Sudanese Swiss Charity Organization, but it's not only for the Sudanese. Even non-Sudanese, and we have also some Swiss who are part of this group, who are also active members of these groups, and which is open, it means open to everyone.
One last word. I mean, these are heavy topics we are talking about, and we always feel a bit helpless. What can we do? I mean, you did something tonight. You came to see this movie. This is something. You open your eyes to see what's happening in Sudan. The other thing is, we always think, okay, maybe I give my 50 francs, I donate my 50 francs, but it's not going to change. But Petros told me earlier today, every franc changes a lot. Maybe your last words about that?
I will add a third possible move. Even if you don't consider donating any franc, please donate your heart. Open your heart and see those people as what they are. They are the victim of war. They don't bring war where they go. They run away from it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and have a safe trip home.